Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is if you'd like to watch this review or not. And by the way, you're watching this. So it's already too late. Welcome to our review on the Dan Show for Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part One. My name is Daniel, and with me today I have Max. How you doing?
I'm great. I love this. I absolutely love the opening once again. Yeah, thank you for having me and thank you for inviting me to talk to you about this awesome film. Like, yeah, it's gonna be fun next half an hour. I don't know for how long we will go for. I hope it's not going to be as long as Tom Cruise running because that there was a lot of that. But I'm really excited
Yeah.
to get into all itsy bitsy details about this film because we have a lot to talk about. Yeah, where do we even start? I don't know.
So I wanted to ask you, like, what are your overall thoughts about the film? Like, how many of these Mission Impossible movies have you seen with Tom Cruise? I mean, obviously he's been in every single one, but I don't know if you have seen all seven. Like, what is your
Mm,
mileage with the franchise? And then did you like this one?
right. I have seen all of them. I haven't. This was the first time I actually went to cinema to see it, to see on the big screen, and I finally understand the appeal. Like it's something that you're meant to watch on the big screen. And my initial thought was that, yeah, I wish there was something more original with the story, and we're gonna get into the story later on. But overall, I think it's one of the best action movies again of like the last decade. It's I mean, okay, there's no because I did say the same thing about John Wick. It's it hasn't got as exciting fighting sequence, but in terms of car chase, jumps, train wrecks, spoiler alert, and any other wreckages and villains, I think it's one of top ones up there. So it
Well, the
was a
train wreck
thrill.
was, yeah, I mean, the train wreck was in the trailer, so not really a spoiler.
Okay, good. Okay,
Like, because you see him hanging off the train in the
right.
trailers.
Okay, great.
Uh, but you said it's a thrill, and I mean, I can. That's probably the most accurate word I can describe it using, like thrill. Like it's a summer movie. I personally really like the movie. I did say in my out of theater review that it's not my favorite Mission Impossible movie.
Hmm.
However, that will probably change when I go see it a second time this week because I was a little tired. We just had finished taping our show. I was running on a little sleep, so I will definitely admit to the fact that I looked at my watch for time a couple of times during the movie.
I
But
did for the
and
like
I
the
don't.
third act. I did look at twice because it did seem like it's going to wrap up
They
quite
were
quickly.
dragging a little. Like, like
Yeah,
one thing I will say about this movie overall is while the action is wall to wall, the set pieces are fantastic. You really have this, one country, a couple of set pieces, then you go to a different part of the world, a
yeah,
whole another set piece, and there's a lot of quick dialogue, and you have good character development. You have something happen in this movie. We're not going to spoil it, which really drives Ethan Hunt forward as a character in a
yeah.
way that's happened before in the franchise, but they were like, you need something
It
to
didn't
kind
go
of
stale.
shake him. Yeah, it didn't
Yeah.
get stale. Like
Mm,
so they did a lot to keep you interested, and not just keep you interested,
right.
keep you captivated. The theater was packed that on my
Oh
screening,
yeah,
and
same,
and
same.
everybody was thoroughly engaged, and I had like two girls on either side. Like there were these two couples, and you could tell like they were like gasping, or one time like they were
And
covering up their
laughing.
face. They were, yeah,
Also
laughing, and
laughing.
they were
That
into it.
I really
So
appreciated the jokes that landed. They
yeah,
they they were cheesy, but at the same time they did work.
it felt a
Yeah.
little sort of a bit of a throwback. Also, like the other thing that was a throwback about this movie that I really miss in a lot of modern blockbusters, because it seems like everybody went to screenwriting school who writes these movies and is now like, oh, this is a deadly sin, we should never do it. Which is that when you have a movie that has a complex story and you have a lot of concepts that you need to get across,
Hmm.
and the story keeps evolving, so now the characters are in these new situations. What they do really well in Mission Impossible franchise movies in general, and they did this really well in this movie, every time you got to a point where maybe the director or the filmmakers felt that the audience might get lost a little bit,
Tom
they
Cruise.
always at that point they would have a slight like explainer scene almost where a character would kind of lay it out like, okay, this is what's going to happen, this is our plan, this is where we are at, these are
Yeah.
our choices. And they did it in a way that was still somewhat somehow captivating, whereas a lot of movies can do that where you're like, oh great, I'm getting exposition in the third act. I never felt that in this movie. If anything, it sort of reset you for the next big
Mm,
action set piece. So I
sure.
personally enjoyed that. It was a
I
throwback.
I did not enjoy the Venice sequence, and I don't know how much we're going into details, but the whole thing in the club, that I think that was way too talky, and
That was a little that
they
dragged.
tried to
Yeah.
build it, the tension, because obviously all the important people and pieces were in this
Hmm.
one scene, one space. But to me, that was my least favorite moment, and that's what I said in my
It felt a little
initial.
perfunctory. Yeah.
Yeah, like initially I just thought the first act I was like, oh my goodness, this is the best thing I'm seeing, like this got me so much, and the whole car chase in Rome. But then the
Yeah.
Venice, I just thought this is a drag. So even when that big thing happened, you know which one,
Yeah.
I didn't feel as emotionally invested as I would have probably if it happened earlier on or later on. I don't know. Maybe they should have waited with that a little bit.
Yeah.
And then
But
obviously the final sequence, like
yeah.
the train, this whole, the one after the other, one after the other, this whole sequence, I never been more anxious and nervous and terrified, and I wanted it to stop, but at the same time I was enjoying the action. I've never experienced anything like this while watching a movie. That's why I really appreciated that. That's why it's super difficult to say whether the movie was good or bad, because you mentioned the aspects of the film that they weren't too explained. They were kind of naturally sort of flowing. But having said that, it did feel like Mission Impossible movie. I felt like a lot of the times they did try to use the same tricks, the same, the
Like the
special
smoke bomb
key,
thing.
the smoke bomb,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
mask, the special key that
But they
opens
didn't
it all.
overdo it though. Like I felt
Uh,
like it was like it wasn't cheesy. Like it to me, it felt like it was a callback to old school Hollywood
yeah,
blockbuster
yeah,
movie making
okay,
in a way that worked. Like there was some cheesiness to this movie that I was like was bordering on Mission Impossible 2 and 3. However,
yeah,
it stayed on the right side of the wall for me. It didn't
right.
quite, jump the shark. So I did appreciate that they walked the line, but they didn't quite cross it.
But speaking
Um,
of cheesiness, don't you think calling the AI the entity was a bit like, can we?
yeah, like on like the 12th time they probably said it, I was like, I get like by this
They
point
need
it's
to
supposed to be
stop.
normalized, but like
Yeah.
here I am thinking like, just call it like, I mean, but like here's the thing, like I kind of thought about it in the theater while watching the movie. I'm like, okay, but because I was just doing this math, I'm like, all right, so well
Mm,
they're calling it this, but then as a screenwriter, like, well, what else would you call it? You could call it AI, but you can't call it something super generic because then the
John.
audience would get lost. You also can't like change the name during the movie because then people are like, oh
Yeah.
wait, well it
What
was
are
one
you
thing
talking about?
earlier. Um, so I mean, I ultimately where I landed with that was they were creative with it
Right.
to come up with a name that a lot of movies haven't used before.
Yeah.
And they treated it in a way like ultimately like some of the visual cues that you saw, like when they're in that club and then this thing is on
Yeah.
like all the screens. I'm like,
I
I've
love the
seen that
sound
before.
design. The sound design of
Yeah.
the entity was really cool. It was
Yep.
something
Yep.
new again. Yeah.
Well, by the way, I don't know if there was a speaker that was blown in my theater that was having this issue, but every once in a while I would hear this like loud like like these banging sounds, and I just maybe that was
No, that was it. That was the
that was
entity.
that was the
That was the
entity.
entity. Yeah.
Okay,
I had the
because
same
because
thing.
I couldn't because by the end of the movie I was like maybe I heard it in a few areas where I wouldn't think that was the entity.
No, that's a good
So
IMAX. I mean,
okay,
have you seen an IMAX or
no, not
no?
IMAX, but I mean I
Fair,
saw it in like a premium, not IMAX, but a different premium format.
fair enough.
But yeah, no, I was like, wait, what is wrong? Is there like a blown woofer somewhere that
No,
I'm hearing?
I have seen
Um,
it in IMAX. That's why it was very clear, like there was a clear distinction. So for whoever's going to watch it, like make sure you
Yeah.
do see an IMAX, because the sound score is just I mean, sound design is just incredible, like and
Yeah.
you really get to appreciate every individual sound like very clearly. But speaking of sound as well, I mean AI, don't you find it fascinating how ahead of the curve they've managed to be? They shot this film in pandemic. That's before
Yeah.
ChatGPT. That's before Stable Diffusion. That's before AI even, exploded.
Yeah, but like, so what that tells me is that there are smart filmmakers here who are doing
Mm,
their homework when they're working on the story, the script,
yeah.
the scenes, everything, like the action set pieces, how all the plot points are integrated together. Because ultimately, a lot of what we're seeing today in the social zeitgeist of, like, open AI and all the various tools, those are things that are people, I feel like the way most people make it seem, or the way it seems to most people today, is that AI just sort of exploded out of nowhere. No, it's been there for years. It's been in, like, Photoshop has had AI features for like a decade. There's a
Yeah.
lot of other programs that have been out there.
It
It just
hasn't been
happens to
mainstream
be,
though. Yeah.
yeah, it just sort of exploded in the mainstream recently. So all what that, again, the credit to the writers, the Christopher McQuarrie, Tom Cruise, the producers, the director, that they went in and they did their research. And like Mission Impossible movies, this, I don't believe this is the first time they've tackled like AI as a concept, but they did it in a way that was mature by today's
But
standards.
today's standard, yeah.
Exactly. And the timing
Mm.
just happened to be really good. I mean, but ultimately,
But
even if
okay, do
all
you
of that stuff
know
hadn't happened, I still would have enjoyed this movie and
but do you
thought it
know
would be really
that?
clever.
Do you know that like the marketing plan actually to do it now, or
What you
whether,
mean?
sorry, whether the initial plan was to release in July 2023, or did whether they
I'm pretty
pushed it
sure.
because
Yeah.
of
No, this
okay,
didn't get pushed. This
all
was
right,
always meant to come out then. If anything, I mean, they might have had a date that they internally had in mind that they moved when Top Gun Maverick got pushed, but ultimately, I don't think we publicly got a date change on this ever. Like, it was
fair,
always meant to be this date.
fair. Mm.
And yeah, look, even if all that AI, was not like the big buzzword in all over social media today, I think people would have gone into this movie, still would have had an appreciation for what it was doing. They
Mm.
just wouldn't have quite understood some of the concepts as well, or the implications of what some of this
The
movie references
consequences,
with
right?
regard to AI, as they do with all the AI, buzzword, like all the stuff that people are aware of. So I think the general audience awareness of what AI, can do, that gives them even more of an appreciation for what this movie portrays. Whereas
Right.
I think ultimately, because Hollywood has done AI related stuff, like the Minority Report came out, 2004. That's not the only example, but like there's a lot of movies out there that have existed before, but the
Hang
average
on,
audience wouldn't
Minority
always have the
Report.
appreciation for it.
Minority Report hasn't had any AI. It had
Yeah, it was, the
oracles.
whole movie was about AI. It was the predictive
Yeah,
AI
no,
based
but
thing, right?
no, it was oracles.
It was
They had
was it
three.
oracles?
They had
But
three oracles that were predicting the future, like the murders.
okay, well,
The
yeah, but
gifted.
like but even then, I would like, okay, they had self-driving cars and cars that were flying. I'm like, that's AI
Yeah,
based. There's a
that's a
lot of other AI
stretch.
concepts.
No, the
There's
the only really good
yeah,
one I thought was very Transcendence with Johnny Depp. I
but
thought that
that
was
was like,
very
it was a
like
bit boring,
it was a
like
boring
as a
movie,
movie, but the
but
concept was
concept
strong.
was
Yeah,
good. Yeah,
I mean, but even
exactly.
Interstellar, like the
Mm.
robot, like AI, the
Okay,
one,
yeah, but
right?
that's not a
Oh,
movie with the
2001, A Space Odyssey.
2001. Okay, there
Like going
you
back
go.
all the way to 2001: A Space Odyssey. I'm just
Yeah,
telling, like, you know
we've
what I
had
mean?
it.
Like,
I
people
do.
have
I
a
do.
different level of appreciation, especially because now I think it feels even more relevant because the average consumer like has access to the kind of AI that, makes a difference
Right.
in our daily lives.
Right.
Whereas in the past, like, AI has always been sort of in the background, or it seems like a distant threat to something that we are sort of like, it's very abstract. Now it doesn't feel so much an abstract concept, and then a movie like this only further illustrates that, hey, AI could be weaponized, and then, that could become
Mm.
quite the problem for the world. Now, I just
Yeah.
wanted to go back quickly before we kind of dive in further into the story. You said something about the fact that during the middle parts of the movie, it sort of dragged a little bit, and they kind of set up. They were trying to set up stuff for the third act, but it just felt like, I think that all the club sequences, because John Wick has been such a big deal recently, I felt
And
like it was a little bit of a John
yeah,
Wick light
that's exactly
version of
what
Mission
I've written.
Impossible.
That's exactly what I've written in my notes. I was like,
Um,
John Wick club scene checked.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then like I because you mentioned that you couldn't quite relate to the like what happens in that middle of the movie. Like there's a big fight sequence, and something changes. Like what really made was like, oh, Ethan Hunt is really now pissed off because that happened. So in order to really feel that moment, I feel like you would feel it more if you had seen like all the especially
I
the last
have.
couple of movies,
No, I
right?
have. But the thing
So
is
you have,
that
so it
yeah,
still
yeah,
didn't connect
I
with.
have.
Okay.
No, because there was just so much talking, and they also okay, there's so I mean, I thought we were talking about AI, and I was going to suggest let's talk about the characters. And yeah, like speaking of characters, like I've always had my favorites, Simon Pegg and uh
I love
um
Simon Pegg in these movies.
I
All the
love
way back.
Simon
What was it? Was it
always.
Mission Impossible 3 was the first one that he got introduced in, and
It
had
was
had
so
the heads
good.
up displays in the cars. I was like, that was the coolest thing ever for me growing up as a kid.
For
I was
me,
like, I
him,
want a car with that like
yeah.
windshield,
For me,
please.
like him giving instructions to Ethan, or like deconstructing the
Or when
one
he's
of
like
many
going up the
bombs.
mountain and he tells him
Yeah,
to jump.
yeah, I'm under severe stress. It's like, and then you see Tom
Yeah.
Cruise about to jump. It's
Jump.
like, are
I'm
you
like, oh,
serious?
you're the one under stress. I'm
I
like, yeah,
love that. I love that. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, obviously Rebecca's Ferguson character, like that's what I mean. Like I wish there was more of her. She's one of my most favorite
yeah.
characters.
I
So I
mean,
feel
you
like
guys kind of
there
look
was no.
alike.
Yeah, you keep saying that. I
I,
mean, you're not the only ones. People do reference that. But then
I'm just saying.
I just wish there was more of that. Instead, they introduced another character who, I understood why it was important for her to to be introduced, but at the same time, there was not enough space for everything. I feel like that's why when it
Yeah,
came to the Venice sequence, I just thought there's so much happening. There's so much explanation. There's so much stakes that need to be explained that
yeah. Like,
everything up to that point was just like it felt flat there, and then
yeah,
the train sequence just kind of saved it for me. Yeah.
yeah. I will say this. Rebecca Ferguson's character in this movie, Ilsa Faust, it was probably my least favorite performance from her out
Performances
of
from
the
her.
3 movies that she's been a part of, because it
I
really felt
mean,
like from the beginning she felt a little detached from the movie and the
sure,
story.
but
Not
it
saying her
was.
performance, but maybe just the way it was written, her
But did
character.
you catch on to the whole Daryl Hannah reference with the because she was sniping the guys in Abu Dhabi,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And she had the eye patch,
The eye
and I
patch.
thought that was beautiful, and I was really happy that they honored it. And speaking of another female characters, Paris. Did you catch on to her? That was the girl from Guardians of the Galaxy,
Yeah,
Plum
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Clementine,
yeah.
right?
Pump Clemente. Yeah, no, I knew that
Yeah,
from the
Clementine.
trailers. I was
Sorry.
like, I'm glad like she's doing this other stuff, because she has a pretty extensive career outside of Guardians, but she hasn't really done a lot of mainstream franchise
Right.
films. And I sort of didn't. I actually almost thought she, like, okay, spoiler alert, she doesn't make it to the end of the movie, but I did think at times that she was. I mean, look,
Right.
honestly though, like here's a they actually, at the end they were like she has a pulse. So I don't know if she. I,
I don't think
I
I don't
don't,
think they had guts. Nope.
because for a second, because like they teased it so hard, and then like Ethan like is there. I'm like, okay, oh, she's gonna die. She's not gonna die. She's
Yeah.
gonna die. Oh, I guess she's gonna die. And then the guy comes over and is like, oh, she's supposed. Oh, she's not gonna die. Like it was just me just going back
Yeah.
and forth, because I
I
really
didn't
liked the character, and she
I
had like a
didn't
nice arc.
I didn't
So
recognize her till like halfway
she
through
looks
the
very
movie.
different. You
Very
watch
different.
any of her other movies, and anything she's been a part of that's not that's what was
Yeah.
her that's not Guardians of the Galaxy. She looks very different. in
Yeah.
every other role. It's
Yeah.
amazing, and she's also got that kind of a look where she just changes her hairstyle and color, and she looks like a totally different
Completely
person.
different.
She can
I
really
think
just blend in. Yeah.
I think it was like a face expression that she did this certain face expression that she's just done in the gardens, and I was like,
Hmm.
ah, that's you. Okay. But it took me longest time. Same as with the guy who plays Gabriel. That's the guy from Ozarks. I was like,
Si, is it Si Morales? I think his name.
yes, exactly. S.I.
Yeah.
Morales. He was incredible once
By the
again.
way, I was like, for the first like half of the movie, I just kept trying to think. Wait, was he in Mission Impossible 1? Was he in the mission? Because then the few times they referenced that, oh, this was even before the
Yeah.
IMF for Ethan Hunt. So I'm like, okay, so they're sort of trying to retcon it somehow the
Mm,
past of Ethan Hunt that we haven't explored. Not really retcon, because I guess since we haven't explored it, fine.
yeah.
But I did kept thinking, I'm like, wait, I don't remember him in the first
Neither.
movie.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So unless I was like, did they recast? Like, wait, because I know like a girl dies in the first movie, but that's not the girl who like that she keeps showing in the flashback sequence. So
Mm.
I was a little confused, but ultimately, like, it's
So it's
and
not the same. I
yeah,
mean, it's
and
not in the universe
yeah. What
that.
I will
Okay.
say though, it's a little like on the nose in terms of, like, they were clearly trying to describe this pattern throughout the movie that if you are Ethan Hunt has all these women come into his life and they all tend to
Yeah.
die the closer they get to him, and they were trying to establish this pattern from like his way back past before he even got to the IMF to like what happens in this movie to maybe what will happen in the future. And then, like you mentioned, but like there was this awkward sort of, the way they wrote it, I feel like could have been better, where Rebecca Ferguson's character and Haley Atwell's character, and then the fact that they're trying to establish this, like, oh, it's either one or the other, and then the whole club sequence, and then they're like, all right, we're just gonna address the elephant in the room scene,
Yeah.
basically. And then from that point onward, I was like, okay, well, now that they went to that much trouble, I bet I know where this is going. This is gonna be like what happened in the last Bourne movie, because they had
Yeah.
to be like, well, we gotta dispose of one at the start of the movie to move on with something else, or whatever, like, fine. And I
Yeah.
know I'm probably going to spoil territory at this point,
Yeah.
but the point is, if you've been watching us this long, then you have already seen the movie and you're interested enough to find out more or talk about it. So, hit the spoilers
Spoiler.
alert. We're gonna go into the details. I did want to also ask you, what did you think about Haley Atwell's character overall? Because I really liked her. Like, throughout the film, she played this outsider, charming person who has a skill set, but maybe not the ideal skill set for what the IMF is
Yeah.
doing,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
driving stuff. And I think they really did I personally love how they
Italian
were like,
job.
oh,
Italian
it's
job. That
it's
was like,
not that easy to
mm,
drive the cars around in the
no.
way that Tom Cruise makes it look easy, and that was
And
like
not in
all on
Italy.
display.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know if you've been to Italy, but like driving a car in Italy, it takes guts.
yeah,
But no, to answer your question, the way they met, on the airport, her and Tom Cruise, I thought it was very charming, very organic. I thought, okay, I'm gonna like her. And I really liked the fact that she wasn't like the Bond girl. She wasn't just like there. I
yeah,
really liked how they really kept it like PC. Really, really like they kept it very PC in terms of clothes. They, all the women weren't, especially Rebecca Ferguson. I just really loved the costume. Speaking of that, so I really like how womanized, but at the same time, a girl that can take care of herself
yeah, yeah. She
was.
had a lot of agency as a character. Yeah,
Exactly. She had enough depth. There was the story. She had the time, chance to redeem herself. However, it was really freaking annoying that she just kept escaping from
yeah.
Ethan over and over and over and
I
over
got a
and
little too. I'm like,
that went
just
stale. That went stale for me. I
yeah.
was like, okay, move
Yeah,
on.
because I know
Give
what
me
they were
something
trying to
else.
do with her character arc, but
Yeah.
I just felt like that whole "I'm gonna run away and go do my own thing," but I keep getting pulled
Yeah.
back into this. That they did that maybe one too many times
Too
throughout the
many
film, because I'm
times.
like,
Exactly.
at some point she's got to realize she's in this for until this thing gets
Yeah.
resolved.
Yeah.
So yeah, but by the end of the movie, I thought that the arc was completed
She had the
fairly well.
chance. Yeah, she
Yeah.
was given the chance to sort of be
Your
Baptist.
mission, should you accept it? Yeah. Um,
Exactly.
which the,
And she was likable in the end. That's what I like. They
yeah,
didn't make her, it was very close for her to become this annoying character, but they've rescued her, and I'm really glad.
Yeah.
That's why I'm glad. I will be looking forward to seeing her in the
Yeah.
next part.
I mean, and look,
Yeah,
Haley Atwell is such a talented actress that I think with a lesser actress, you might have not liked her character as much up
yeah,
until maybe the end of the movie. But like she did it really, she played off the character really well and had this like just natural charm and charisma about her where you appreciated her performance even when she was kind
yeah,
of being the one person who were like, oh come on, let's just move on to the next step so that Ethan can move forward and we or the movie can move forward where we're going next. Because at times when she was like escaping or like trying to get away from Ethan, I'm like,
yeah.
okay, so now we have to go on this like another side quest. Why can't we just get back on the main adventure?
But
Like, but it was
right,
still fun to kind of watch because the humor that was integrated was
yeah.
into that, like the driving
The
stuff. I think I had fun with
driving.
it.
I mean, that was the stunt on its own. Driving was being, and it was so funny
Yeah,
because they were clearly like they just met each other, but they were very close in that car.
yeah,
Like she was borderline hugging him the entire time,
hmm
and they were trying to escape. It was great sequence. Um,
yeah,
but going back to Haley, Vanessa Kirby playing Haley. I must say, like that was very iconic in terms of
yeah,
it's always really difficult to play someone else's character, especially if you also are like a completely different character. Like it was I think she really nailed down the whole way how the whole Haley kind of movement and stuff. Like it was extreme. I was convinced that was Haley Atwell wearing a mask of Vanessa Kirby. Obviously, it's not possible, but like I need to give Vanessa Kirby like pros
yeah.
for that. It was
There
a
was a
really
lot
good
of
performance.
subtle like facial movements and just like mannerisms that she did really, because I'm like, at first I was like, wait, they're just gonna like have her now be herself, like, or like
Yeah,
play her character, but there was a lot of subtlety to that, like when she's
the
negotiating at the
negotiations.
table in the
Yeah.
train. But like ultimately I did actually appreciate seeing Vanessa Kirby's character back in the franchise, because she was in, what was it, like a couple of movies ago or something, and it
Yeah.
was sort of, she just kind of drops in and out of the film. And then she's made a habit of doing this recently. I think she did something very similar in the Fast and Furious franchise in one of the recent entries. So she's got, I mean, well, actually no, she was in Hobbs and Shaw. That's what I'm confused. She was they had this whole sequence at this big mansion. They were throwing a party, and she's this big a crime kingpin or queen, I guess. But and the IMF people, like Ethan Hunt and his team, show up and they do this deal. I think it was either the last movie or the one before it,
I think it was the
but
last one.
she just kind of weaves in and out of the story. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, I mean, it's Vanessa Kirby is a fantastic actress. From The Crown to now. There's rumors out there she might be playing Sue Storm in Fantastic Four. Who knows? Um, and of course, she
Oh,
was in
I can
Hobbs and
see that.
Shaw. So
Nice. Okay.
I really love seeing her in this movie. And then ultimately, look, there at the end of the film, with Clementine's character apparently surviving, you really kind of, I was actually worried at times in this film that some of the characters, like a lot more of the characters, would get off, but not very many of them did. What I
Hmm.
was disappointed by, however, was I realized this was part one of two because this is in the marketing, right? So I did think that there was only so much that could happen in this movie. Like nothing would have the only thing that would have truly surprised me in this movie was if they killed off Ethan Hunt, which I was like, okay, well, if they did that, then the next movie would be the last movie in the franchise. So that was not going to happen. But
Well,
outside of that, so
them
there was a certain
almost
level of
killing,
anticlimacticness to it because it's part one of a two-part
but
story.
them killing of Rebecca Ferguson in the first 2 minutes of the movie, I was like,
It wasn't the
no.
first 2 minutes though.
It was
Oh,
very
that part.
early.
Oh, you're talking
The
about the one where
first
she gets
one.
shot. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
like, well, because the way they hinted at, because she was lying on her back, I'm like, he didn't turn her over. He's just
You
looking
were
at her.
suspicious.
It was incomplete. It
For me,
felt
I
like it
was
was,
like,
yeah,
there's no way that's it. There's no way that's it. Like, there must be
yeah,
something, but it was really good to see her back. I mean, to see
yeah.
the whole,
Yeah,
how it
but I mean,
happened.
even that whole sequence, I'm like, this movie did a fantastic job of, again, like the budget for this movie is under 200 million, well under 200 million. So and it's gonna probably make like more money than any other Mission Impossible movie before. The last I looked at the Rotten Tomato score, it's sitting at like 99%. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? And it had like 100 plus
Solid.
reviews, so it's not just like 30 reviews and it's
Mm,
99%. So it's the best rated movie in the franchise. It's got a budget that's very manageable, and while doing all of these sequences that seem to go all over the world. Like one thing that I don't like about superhero movies these days, or a lot of them, the ones especially that are pretty mediocre, is that they tend to have these big CGI action set pieces, which
yeah.
feel like they're not tangible and they're not real. And you
Mm,
can't really relate to that because you're just looking at some computer generated imagery. It's very difficult to give yourself that sense of scale and that global, like, oh, they're going all over the world. Plus it's a global franchise, so you want the people who are watching it in the Middle East, people who are watching it in Europe, and they can all relate to, oh, that's Austria, I've been on that train, I kind of
yeah.
know what that looks like, or I've been to Abu Dhabi, I've been on that terminal, oh my god, I was there last week. Like, there's that certain sense of you connect to it better, and you don't need to spend 250 million dollars to do that. And Mission
Yeah.
Impossible movies have always been a great example of that, because you get the spectacle, but you're not blowing the budget, and you're not going, you're not jumping the shark either. You're not showing us something completely impossible,
Do you,
because he does all his own stunts. Tom Cruise does.
yeah. Do you know how I felt about the film that you called it spectacle? It was more than a spectacle because I felt like I paid more. I paid less for what I've been served. Like I was overwhelmed with spectacle effect. Like going to the theater
This is
would
a movie
not.
that you need to watch more than once to truly appreciate it. I
Literally.
definitely believe
Yeah.
that now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
Uh, like the other thing about this movie that I really appreciated was the fact that this movie had not just good dialogue, and it had a very tightly woven script that really didn't have any fat on it. There was nothing, almost nothing unnecessary in there.
Club
I know
scene.
that there were
I'm
some.
sorry. The club scene
Well,
was
no, well,
cringy.
I
I
see
was
what
like,
you mean,
you're
but I feel
too
like maybe.
serious for like the setup, the setting, the characters.
Well,
Half
they
of the
start
people
out pretty
don't know each
lighthearted.
other. But that's
Yeah.
what I mean. There's like the Simon Pegg, Tom Cruise, the Rebecca, like the Curtage. I can never pronounce his name correctly. The main guy, the guy that's running MI. What's his name?
What, Wing Rames, or
No,
who are you talking about?
Curtage.
The
Curtage.
Kittredge.
Kittredge, that's
Kittredge, the
him, right?
CIA,
The
the
CIA,
director. Yeah.
him. Like there was like a lot of good script, good back and forth, but that scene, I don't know, it
I
almost
will.
killed the movie for me.
No, I
I
agree
really
with you
didn't
that that
like
was a
it.
little cringe, and then it felt a little perfunctory. Like they were just, they had to do, but like by the same token, I think that was necessary to kind of establish what then happens afterward and later in the movie, because I think they were setting up for a payoff.
Mm.
And so in that sense, it felt necessary. So maybe what needed to happen was the execution could have been better, or maybe some of the dialogue could have been different.
Maybe
But
editing. I think it was
yeah,
maybe slightly too
the
long
pace,
on each characters. The
yeah.
pacing kind of dropped there. Yeah.
But ultimately, like I can tell you, like outside of like the Dark Knight, there's very few movies that are like this blockbuster level movies that in the last 10 or so years, where I watched them and felt like the pacing was damn near perfect, if not perfect, overall. I mean, every movie has some imperfections, but ultimately this movie had very little fat on it. Like everything felt
Yeah.
like it needed to be there. Like if you cut it, like then something else wouldn't make sense. And it's very
Right.
rare to see that. And the Mission Impossible movies, from like the fourth movie onwards, have been so good at making sure they have absolutely nothing extra on there. You appreciate every bit of the movie, and every bit of the movie makes sense and is there for a reason, which ideally all movies should do that. But what tends to happen is a lot of movies tend to put in stuff because they're trying to establish some franchise continuity, set up some new world or some new character. This movie, everything that it does, because it does do a lot of those same things that a lot of other blockbusters do. However, it executes it well, and it does it in a way where from the beginning to the end, whether it's a character arc, or whether it's setting up the sequel to this movie, or whether it's going through the different locations, it's all set up well, and they don't linger on anything too long.
Yeah.
Like I never felt like they were in any action sequence too long. The only exception I will make to that is the scene at the end in the third act of the train sequence when they're trying once the bridge is blown and they're trying to like survive. I felt like that scene went on a little longer than it should have. However, by the end of the scene, I appreciated why it went on for as long as it did, because that scene
Oh, I loved
literally
it. I
that scene was
absolutely
because
loved
I
the
was like,
fact,
okay, well, how many cars are they gonna jump through,
but
and
that
how
was the
many different
point.
things they're gonna? But like, what I
Yeah.
appreciated about it by the end of the sequence was not so much the fact that it felt a little repetitive, because they're like, okay, now they've gone through 5 cars, and each time they're trying doing something different to try to survive.
And
What I
that's what I
appreciated though was that Haley Atwell's character, like that whole sequence served as the ultimate like test in terms of whether she actually trusts Ethan Hunt and his cause. And you
each
can really tell that whole sequence like that, so it was important for a character arc. And it was, I think, is going to be even more important once you look back on this movie when you go see the sequel. So
I
I did
feel
appreciate it by the end.
I feel like each car was like its episode or its film on its own. Like it was
Yeah,
very
it
nicely
was a
done.
whole stunt sequence onto itself.
It
Yeah.
wasn't repetitive. Every wagon had its own difficulties, challenges, like things to look out for. And the fact that it went on, like the fact that that was repetitive really worked for me in the scene, because that's the point where I was actually holding onto the edge of the seat, like, and I was terrified. That was more nerve-wracking for me than the actual jump from the cliff, which has been
Yeah,
obviously
because
so
well, because I think the jump from the cliff. One thing I will say is because the marketing has been so focused on the stunts
on
and
the
the
stunt.
cliff jump, that I felt like that sort of diminished the effect in this movie once you actually see it happen.
Yeah,
Um,
it's worth
because you've
seeing
seen,
still.
because the novelty isn't quite there now. And then going back to the train sequence, the reason why it felt a little anticlimactic, I'm like, oh my god, how many more cars are gonna go through? And in the moment, that's how I was feeling. And the reason for that was I'm doing this math in my head. Okay, this is part one. There's clearly another part. So only if one of two or three things can happen here. A, one of them could die. Two, and if one of them does die, it's not going to be Tom Cruise's character. Two, if they could just fall into the water and then they'll probably survive, and then we'll see them in the next movie, like what happens at the start of Skyfall with James Bond. Or three, they're gonna make it through it to the end, and then we're gonna go on to the sequels. I'm like, because and that's one of the things where I'm like, I wish they didn't call this part one. I wish. I mean, and I get it from a marketing standpoint. There's a there's certainly a reason maybe why producers
Mm.
and the studio likes to do that. But I ultimately, if they just call this Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, and then they left the because the story doesn't quite get resolved at the
And
end.
reveal it at the end as the movie
Part
ends,
one.
part
And then
one.
that it's kind of like there's this
Mm.
show on Hulu in the U.S. called Des X, and it was about like quantum computing and AI. And then at the end of the show, they changed one letter in the name. It was Devs, and then it changes to Deus. So they changed the we to a U, and
Mm.
it has like it completely recontextualizes like what you just watched, but it
Clever.
happens at the end of the.
Nice.
So that could have definitely been like either they could have
Yeah,
said to be continued like old school TV style like Mission Impossible's
exactly. Yeah.
television roots, or they could have said part one, or Ethan. Oh, they could do the Marvel route. Ethan Hunt and his team will return, or something like that. But I just because that kind of that part one in the title did kind of make the ending feel a bit anticlimactic.
Yeah.
And the other thing that whenever there's a multi-part TV series of episodes, I always what bothers me is at some point along the way, or but even when they don't say it's multi-part, it's like a multi-parter storyline. At some point in the episode, I realized that okay, so clearly this conflict's not getting resolved here because we only have a few minutes left in the movie and we're nowhere near a resolution. So there must be another like episode or the follow-up coming where this is gonna happen. So that leaves me to this set feeling in this feeling in the pit of my stomach that but like I was so excited to see the resolution, but now I have to wait. Like so that was a little like because once like S.I. Morales' character kind of escapes and you're like and then they spent like the next 10 minutes just trying to escape the falling cars and of the train after the bridge
But
blows
I
up.
I
I was like,
liked it.
okay,
I
so this is where this movie
especially
is gonna end. I'm gonna have to wait for like the ultimate resolution till the next movie.
sure, but especially after the I feel like there is some cleverness about the really going crazy with the marketing of that stunt of the cliff essentially, because I thought this is the big stunt that, you know, Ethan Hunt always gets in the Mission Impossible. And then when you're being served the train, it's like you realize, okay, it's not just one train, it like train car. It's multiple. And I don't know, I felt like that was the moment where I think I said that before. I was being served something that I didn't even expect it or wanted to get. That's why it felt
Yeah, like a
very
bonus. Yeah.
like a bonus. Exactly, I really like it. It was just like showing like, hey, we have budget for one more sequence. So I did appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this movie definitely made a meal out of every action set piece in a way that did not feel redundant. So I
Yeah,
do appreciate. I mean, look, ultimately, like I said, this movie will probably hit me even better the second time because there was so much happening, and when you're
there was a
watching it
lot.
for the first time, you're just trying to absorb everything and keep up with all the details. Like literally, the way my mind works watching a movie like this is okay. I take that piece in. All right, I'm gonna shelve that for now. And then let's just keep getting this new information. Oh, new piece. Let's Here's this other jigsaw puzzle in the back of my mind that now I'm putting together. Oh, that jigsaw puzzle is complete. Oh, it connects to this other like, so I'm just like putting the pieces together. But when I
Yeah.
go in the second time, I can just gonna sit back and just let it just wash over me in a
Yeah.
way that I'm not gonna, because I kind of know what happens. I can just enjoy it more
Enjoy it.
because a
Yeah.
movie like this is, it somehow manages to be a very heady movie while also being a
Yeah.
very easy popcorn flick that everybody at the theater can enjoy.
I must admit the whole concept of entity, even though it's super closely related to AI and stuff and things that I really am, you know, interested in kind of currently with the trend and stuff, it was really hard to comprehend a lot of the things. That's why I really understand what you're saying. Like it was a lot to take on whilst also trying to enjoy the movie. So I completely agree. The second time, it's going to be far more enjoyable. But speaking of the AI, don't you think AI is going to be our next metaverse? One of my favorite film critics mentioned that the other day. Like, this is going to be a trend now. And fair enough, like Mission Impossible started it, but watch them come. Like, it's going to be more and more daring. I mean,
Well,
hell,
Hollywood,
Black Mirror already started it. I already mentioned it
yeah,
yesterday.
but look, I mentioned it earlier in this review that AI is not a new thing in Hollywood in terms of like as a story plot device or a story
But
concept.
as
Like
a
going back to
mainstream, though,
2001 as a Space Odyssey, right? Mainstream, it's gonna, yes, but like when you say the metaverse, to me, what I think of is, oh, is it gonna be the next big fad that doesn't quite end up being what we keep thinking it's gonna be?
it's
Like,
going to be too
yes,
much with time. Yeah.
because ultimately I think people have exaggerated the pros and cons of AI in both directions, and we're probably going to wise up to the idea that yes, AI is going to revolutionize the world that we live in, maybe for the good and for the bad, like the internet did too. However, it's not going to all of a sudden be either the apocalypse or utopia. It's just going to be, we're going to be living in a new in a new, more evolved world, much like we lived in a world before the internet, and now we live in a world with the internet, a world without social media and a world with social media. It's not like all of a sudden there was, I mean, yeah, you could call it a revolution. We now have phones that are more powerful than what the astronauts in Apollo 11 had to land on the moon, but it becomes normalized. So I think right
Mm.
now people are looking at AI as this, either this thing that's going to take their jobs or that thing that's going to, like, help make their lives way better and easier than ever before. But over time the effects
Or
will
both.
probably become normalized, and people will start, and after a while people are like, oh, AI, like AI is a buzzword right now, like the internet was a buzzword in the 90s, or social media was a buzzword in the 2000s. But nowadays it's normal, and I think AI will just become normal, like it's just a part of our lives. So until then, definitely, I think like what the multiverse went through the last few years, when like every other movie is about the multiverse, I think AI will become more and more a part of our movies and TV shows. And as Hollywood tends to do, it will probably get beaten to death as a concept. But then after a while, and then hopefully along the way, we'll get a few smart adaptations with the concept, like Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, which I think tackled it in a way that was more mature than most other iterations of a movie or TV show have done before.
Yeah. Amen.
So
Well said.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm glad. I must say I had to sleep on it, but I'm glad that it is your to kind of summarize, it is your Mission Impossible movie. It's, as I completely agree with you, it's not the best Mission Impossible movie in terms of story. And
yeah,
that's how I feel. The story kind of, there was nothing
It's-
innovative. It
yeah.
used the same kind of tricks and cats that I had in the bag. But in terms of action sequence, it definitely lives up to its popularity. No, it's up to its fame. Like every time
Yeah,
Mission Impossible kind of sets the standard in terms of the stunts. I mean, or Tom Cruise does,
yeah,
and he maintains it. And as we said yesterday, he just keeps going higher and higher, greater and greater. And yeah, the story about the stunt, like the apparently the director, Christopher, like he asked Tom Cruise, so what do you want to do in this movie? And Tom Cruise was like, yeah, I want to jump off the cliff. And Tom Cruise asked Chris, like, what about you? And he was like, okay, only if you let me crash the train. And they're like, okay. And that's how it happened. That's how they actually ended up getting both of their stunts. It was essentially a middle-aged men fantasy played out on the screen. And it worked. It worked.
yeah. And I bet they were just like playing with GI Joe characters and Thomas the Train Engine when they were talking about it, just like planning it out. If you let me do that, then I'll let you do this, and then we'll both be happy. I mean, it's the literally at the beginning of the movie, you see when they show the opening credits, like they do in every Mission Impossible movie. It now says a Tom Cruise film.
Film
Like he
production,
is
yeah.
the main producer on this movie, which
Yeah.
I'm like, he's graduated to that level in Hollywood, and absolutely deservedly so.
Amen.
Ultimately, my only concern moving forward with the franchise is because this movie did feel like at times the story was secondary to all the action set pieces and the
Yeah.
visual spectacle, that you don't want to take it to an extreme where the story becomes so secondary that people are just, it just feels like a bunch of action set pieces thrown together, and they don't make a lot of, like, they don't have as much meaning to the viewer. And that's when, action without purpose becomes visual noise. So hopefully we don't end up in that situation. I don't think that's what happened in this movie. But there's sneaking suspicion, or like there's some signs, I should say, that give me a sneaking suspicion that hopefully that's not, I'm not saying the next movie is going to have this. I just don't want Tom Cruise's career and every movie, like over time, I don't want to have that become a trend. I do trust Christopher McQuarrie as a filmmaker enough, as a writer, that they won't let this happen. But
Yeah.
this movie, that's my only concern walking out of this. I felt like at times the action was so central that the story, you just kind of forgot about the story because we were
Yeah.
just spending 10 minutes on something
On
like
the
escaping
action.
cars in the train.
Yeah. There was not much space, as we said, for characters.
Because I'm like, after a while, I was like, I
yeah.
got the point. Yes, they're gonna
and
survive. I'm sorry.
you,
Like, I'm sorry. I'm on the other end of the
yeah.
spectrum on this.
No,
I
no, no, no.
apologize.
No, because I completely see it. Because funny enough, you mentioned that there was like a character development, but funny enough, if you think about it, what was her name? Grace's character. What's her name again?
Grace was
Haley
Haley
Atwell.
Yeah,
Haley
Grace.
Atwell's character. She was the only one who actually got a decent one. Like they tried Simon Pegg here and there and
He
stuff.
had a bit of an arc, but then he disappears a
it
little,
was
and then comes
him.
back at the end. And then Ving Rhames' character like disappears, like after he's like, "I have to leave, Ethan," and then he like,
Yeah.
then he tells him like,
I,
like what he has to do, and then goes. Like if you don't see
but
him again at the end of the movie,
I
what
must
happened?
say, I got huge notes to Tarantino in this movie. Not only with the whole Kill Bill, Kill Bill, namely. Like, I had, Daryl Hannah, the eye patch, and then Paris's character, she reminded me massively of, oh my goodness, what's her name?
Uma Thurman?
No, Lucy Liu.
Lucy Liu. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Paris, she had this whole, she had her squad, essentially. Lucy Liu, and there was the character that very much reminded me of Paris's character, like this
Yeah.
cool, dangerous, deadly young girl who dresses like a teenager. I don't know. It's just, it was
Yeah.
iconic, I thought. And
Yeah.
not to mention a yellow car, Italian jobs, but also it could have been a pussy wagon.
And,
I don't
and then
know.
the way it pulls out, and then the first thing he does is runs into a wall because he's
Love
like,
it.
"Oh, I'm not familiar with this." It's like there was that little brief moment of, "Oh, Tom Cruise is telling you he's old and he's having fun with it," or like whatever. Like
I
I
loved it.
just the car sequence in Venice was particularly enjoyable
That was in
because
Rome. That was in
oh,
Rome.
Rome,
That's
right?
why
Sorry,
much
they
better.
were on the
Much
water in
better.
Venice, yeah,
Yeah.
but that sequence because they've done car stuff in like a lot of Mission Impossible movies, so the fact that they've found a way to make this stand out by itself as something different and new that we haven't seen
Yeah.
before, and they added some humor along the way was very fun to see.
The roundabout, even something as silly
Yeah,
as the
she's
roundabout,
like,
I was like,
yeah,
this
he's
is
like, oh
pure
no, take that
comedy.
exit, no, and then they just keep going around. I was
The
like, no, oh, okay,
whole
no, we just keep going,
the
and
whole
then
room was in tears. Everyone were
yeah.
crying from
Yeah.
laughter.
I
Oh,
think that
and
was a little too intense watching this movie because then some of those moments, like I had more fun with remembering it than in the moment
right.
because so I need to go watch this a second time to
Yeah.
really enjoy it again.
Yeah. It's
Um,
has this effect.
I mean, look, ultimately, just to kind of to conclude here, because we can keep talking about this for hours. There's so much in this movie that we can dive into, and I'm sure we will for the next weeks and months. And I'm sure when the sequel comes out, we'll come back and revisit this movie. But I will say the best thing that I liked about this movie overall was that it's a summer spectacle that, once again, much like Top Gun Maverick did last year, feels like a movie that's made for the summer months where you're going to take a whole family, like anybody of any age, of any creed, whether you like action movies, whether you like your comedies or whatever, you can go to this movie. You can have a fun time at the movies. You'll walk away with something relevant to what's going on in the world now with AI and stuff,
Yeah.
but you wouldn't like come out of this movie thinking, "Oh my god, that was boring," or "That was frustrating," or "That was annoying." No, you're gonna come out of this movie satisfied, entertained, and asking for more because you're like, well,
Yeah.
where is part two? This was so thoroughly enjoyable. And I think you walk out of this movie thinking that, hey, this was worth the price of admission. And the fact that in my screening, at least before the movie starts, you had Christopher McQuarrie and Tom Cruise show up for for about a minute, thanking the crowd, like, hey, we made this movie for you. We really thank you
Wait,
for coming to the
what?
theater to watch this. We make this movie for the theaters.
On the
So
screen
we
or
really
in
appreciate
person?
you. No, they were on screen. They had this like
Okay,
video
okay.
that shows up because I was at this special early screening,
Right.
so they
I
had this like
thought
video thanking. So I really appreciate that the fact that they're trying, they make the extra effort as filmmakers to thank the audience for coming in and patronizing this movie because otherwise where would the theatrical experience be if the people didn't support it at a time when they could be watching something on Netflix, they could be playing a video game, they could be playing a game on their phone, or they could be doing any number of things when it's summer and the weather is good outside.
I
This
mean it's a
movie
good way to cool
is
down.
exactly,
Yeah.
it's a movie that helps you just get away from the thick of the day to day. Like you can just get away from your daily life and have fun at the movies.
And
And it's
forget
a
about the
very
world.
pure at the movies, old school kind of an experience. Yeah, forget about your worries, like all the stuff that you have going on in your life for a couple of hours. I mean, did you feel that way, or was that like did you enjoy it
Yeah,
at that
forget
level?
about the world. That was sure there. But what I was gonna, I don't know. I was gonna say something and I forgot. Never mind.
Well, I guess on that note, we'll leave it there for now. I'm sure we'll revisit this again in the future. Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part One. I will go watch it a second time. There's a rare occasion that I will go watch a movie twice, but I think this is one of those movies that's I'm gonna enjoy just as much, if not more, on the second watch. And Mags, if you go check it out a second time, let me know if you liked it better or not. And if you guys are going to be watching this movie, have watched this movie, let us know what you think about it in the comments below. Of course, if you like this conversation, then come back for more. We're doing this every day, every week, every month of the year. We'll be talking about Barbie, Oppenheimer. There's so much more to come this summer, and then so much more to come in the fall. So do, tune into Also Curious. Hit the like button, subscribe. That really helps us out. And come back here and check out more content. Next week, we're going to be talking about, I think Barbie and Oppenheimer are on deck pretty soon. So we'll be back for more. And until then, enjoy Tom Cruise and all his action, goodness, and glory. It's been the Dan Show. Thanks, Max.
Thank you, Dan. I know what I forgot to mention. Tom Cruise is running. That's something you must see. He
Yeah,
runs a
there's a
lot.
lot of that. Definitely.
Yeah.
If there's nothing else you're gonna go watch this movie for, watch him run and watch him on a motorcycle. Like, he does both of those things, and he does them as good as ever.
Yeah. Thanks for
But
having me,
until
Dan.
then,
It's been
thanks,
fun.
Max, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Dan Show.